a man staring down death, a nation spiraling into chaos, a revelation poised to alter the course of human history. Imagine standing there as God tears the veil between heaven and earth and chooses one voice to record a mystery the world could scarcely imagine. Have you ever wondered why, out of all 66 books, Isaiah stands out as extraordinary? Why so many call him the evangelist of the Old Testament? What is it about his words that made Jesus cite Isaiah again and again? Today you're going to hear something that could change the way you read Scripture forever. Get ready, because what you're about to encounter isn't just history. It's a message that reads like a secret code, still speaking with urgency to our generation. This is the book that foretold a virgin birth centuries in advance, that sketched the suffering of the Messiah with startling clarity long before Roman crucifixion became infamous. And that paints the most vivid portrait of the one to come. This content is free, but its impact can be profound. If this message stirs your heart, would you help us share it? Subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support helps us keep spreading the word every day. And consider this, Isaiah doesn't only look backward. His voice reaches forward with warnings and promises that many believe are unfolding right before our eyes. Do you know why people sometimes call Isaiah the fifth gospel? His book contains 66 chapters, a striking parallel to the Bible's 66 books. And its movement from judgment to hope mirrors the sweep from the Old Testament to the New. Coincidence or something more? Either way, what you're about to discover will take your breath away, because Isaiah holds prophecies so specific, so humanly unlikely, that scholars and skeptics have debated them for centuries. Get ready for a journey that can deepen your faith, because by the end of this story, you may never see the Bible the same way again. That year, Jerusalem felt draped in shadow. King Uzziah's death sent a deep wave of fear through Judah, quiet on the surface, obvious in every face on the street. For 52 years he had given the nation stability and growth. Now his passing seemed to signal a season both dark and uncertain. Isaiah, a young priest from a respected family, watched with growing concern. He had been raised on stories of God's majesty and had stood in the temple courts since childhood, but it felt as if the city had lost its bearings. Corruption and idol worship were seeping into the very center of the holy place. Nobles and priests meant to model righteousness now chased their own advantage. Disturbed to the core, Isaiah withdrew to a small chamber near the temple and sat in silence. Outside, the wind rose and hammered the shutters, as if the city itself were warning of what was coming. He couldn't name it, but he knew a great shift was near. His heart would not settle, caught between fear and an aching sense of expectation. The door flew open and shattered the quiet.
"Brother Isaiah!"
"Brother Isaiah!" cried Micah, his close friend. "Have you heard? The borders are in danger. The Assyrians are on the move. With Uzziah gone, they think we're easy prey." Isaiah drew a long breath before he answered. "And our people, Micah, how are they reacting?" Micah dropped his gaze, shoulders heavy. Fear, confusion. Some are already talking about cutting deals with nations that bow to other gods. Isaiah's face tightened. Micah, our rescue won't come from human bargains. We have to return to the God of our fathers." Micah searched Isaiah's eyes. "But who will listen in a moment like this? Who will hear you?" Isaiah stood in the doorway and looked toward the horizon, where dark clouds were gathering like a warning. "And maybe no one will listen at first," he said quietly, "but someone has to speak. Someone has to remind our people who the true king is." Micah felt his throat tighten and nodded, moved by his friend's unshakable resolve. As Isaiah made his way toward the temple, he passed men arguing in tight knots and women weeping for sons who might soon be called to war. An elderly priest met him with a hollow look. "Young Isaiah, do you honestly believe God still hears us? Open your eyes. He has abandoned us." Isaiah answered, calm but unyielding, "God does not abandon his people. We are the ones who've turned away from him." The old man shook his head and drifted off. Inside the temple, the silence felt thick, almost physical. Isaiah moved toward the altar, lowered himself to his knees, and prayed, "God of our fathers, we are lost. Our nation is drifting from your law. Our hope is fading. Where else can we turn but to you?" As he prayed, a wind swept through the sanctuary, and the great veil shivered, as if the air itself were trembling. An indescribable presence began to saturate the room. Weighty, overwhelming, followed by a radiance from beyond the veil that pierced him with a brilliance too pure to bear. His eyes flooded. His body shook. "O Lord," he whispered through a trembling voice, "what am I seeing?" Then a voice rose, deep, majestic, rolling through the stones. "Holy, Holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. Isaiah collapsed to the floor, unable to stand beneath the force of the vision. Overwhelmed by the contrast between that holiness and his own condition, he cried out in despair, "Woe is me! I am undone, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." A seraph swept from the heights to the altar, lifted a live coal with tongs, and Isaiah's heartbeat hammered in his chest. The messenger moved toward him with a calm, merciful steadiness, bringing the ember to the young priest's lips. "Do not be afraid, Isaiah," the voice said, gentle yet unyielding. "This coal has touched your lips, your guilt is taken away, your sin forgiven." The burn was real, searing, cleansing, strangely freeing. Then the voice of the Lord rolled through the temple once more. "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Isaiah raised his head, knowing that whatever lay ahead would cost him dearly, yet unable to do anything but yield. With a resolve deeper than fear, he answered, "Here am I, send me." He could not have known that what he saw in that sanctuary would mark him for the rest of his days. Isaiah stayed on his knees on the cold temple floor, heart pounding, mind reeling. His lips still burned from the touch of the coal, and yet a new reality opened before him, one that no human mind could hold. Everything seemed to vibrate, the stone beneath him, the walls around him, even the air itself pulsed with a force beyond words. A light so intense broke in that he had to cover his eyes. Unable to bear the blaze, through the gaps of his trembling fingers, he caught astonishing detail. A throne, majestic, high, and lifted up, blazed with a pure, piercing radiance, and upon it sat the Lord, vast and immeasurable, his glory so great no face could be beheld. Around the throne, celestial beings with 6 wings moved without pause, 2 covering their faces, 2 covering their feet, and with 2 they flew, while a deep rolling anthem filled the sanctuary. "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts! The whole earth is full of his glory!" The sound sank into the prophet's very bones until every fiber trembled. The very foundations quaked under the weight of that proclamation, and smoke began to fill the house, veiling the scene in a holy haze. Overwhelmed, Isaiah murmured under his breath, "How am I even here? This is more than any mortal can bear." With each wave of the angelic chorus, his heart sank deeper into the painful awareness of his own impurity. It wasn't mere fear, it was a crushing shame before unfiltered holiness. He bowed his head. A single tear traced down his cheek and fell to the temple floor. "Woe is me," he whispered, trembling beneath the weight of the revelation. "I am unworthy of this. I don't deserve to witness such glory. I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips." He pressed both hands to his chest, as if to hold back the suffocating heaviness bearing down on him. His breath grew shallow, his body weakening under the magnitude of the vision.
"Why have you brought me here, Lord?"
He groaned, feeling completely unable to endure such blazing perfection. Still on his knees, he felt the voice that filled the temple swell even louder until the very foundations seemed to quake beneath the weight of that proclamation. Isaiah began to sob, grasping the full gravity of his condition before unfiltered holiness. "There is no rescue for me here," he whispered, desperate. "I stand before the living God. No mortal can survive his presence." Suddenly a shadow fell across him, snapping his thoughts in two. He lifted his head slowly and saw a seraph speeding toward him. His heart slammed against his ribs. For a moment he was sure this was the end. The radiant messenger carried something in his hand, and when Isaiah finally made it out, his breath caught. A live coal, lifted straight from the altar. Its searing glow seemed to set the whole sanctuary alight, casting frantic, dancing shadows along the smoke-veiled walls. The seraph drew closer, its gaze fixed on the trembling prophet. "No, Lord, I can't bear this," Isaiah pleaded, trying instinctively to pull back. The messenger touched down before him, steady and composed. The live coal held firm in his hand. His eyes shone with a calm that carried absolute assurance. "Isaiah," he said, voice deep and consoling, "this coal will touch your lips to purify you. Do not be afraid." Before Isaiah could move, the searing heat pressed against his mouth. Pain fierce as fire, yet braided with a surge of release. A cleansing that cut straight through his fear. He cried out, not only from the burn but from the shock of holiness breaking in. The seraph drew the ember away with a faint, kind smile. "Your guilt is removed. Your sin is forgiven." Isaiah lifted his eyes toward the throne, still shaking, and felt an impossible lightness rise within him, as if a weight he had carried his whole life had finally been taken off his heart. Then the voice rose again, powerful, unmistakable, cutting through every other sound. "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" It went through him like fire in his bones, a clarity that settled deeper than fear and pride and doubt, filling him with a conviction not of his own making. Before he could count the cost or map the road ahead, he heard his own voice answer, steady, unshaken. "Here am I, send me." Even as the words left his lips, a chill ran down his spine. Something within warned that nothing in his life would remain the same. He could not begin to imagine the pain, the rejection, the long obedience and trials that still waited for him. The blaze of glory started to soften, the edges of the sanctuary returning, and he realized the vision was drawing to a close. Yet before relief could rise, a deep ache flooded his chest, as if one message had been sealed and another, heavier one, was being placed in his hands to carry for years. The air seemed to thicken once more. A new and fearful image began to gather, slow as a storm assembling on the horizon, its contours sharpening before his eyes. And just when he thought the weight of it would crush him, the utterly unexpected broke in. The heat still burned on Isaiah's lips. Even after the heavenly messenger withdrew with the live coal, the fire lingered, pulsing like a heartbeat. It was pain braided with a strange relief, as if, with every passing second, something impure was being torn out from within him. Isaiah stayed on his knees, eyes closed, breath coming hard. His body trembled. His hands, spread on the cold temple floor, could barely hold his weight. He felt suspended between life and death, between the human and the divine. Then a voice, soft yet firm, broke the silence. "Rise, Isaiah!" He opened his eyes with effort. The seraph who had touched his lips still hovered before him, the light around him no longer blinding, yet the glory of the place was undeniable. "Your guilt is removed," the messenger said again. "Your sin is forgiven." Isaiah's voice shook. Why me? I am only a fragile man, a sinner." The seraph answered with a quiet smile, as if the reason were too clear to need words. The air began to tremble again, and a voice, more powerful, more majestic than anything Isaiah had ever heard, rolled through the temple stones. "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" His heart seemed to stop. The question hung there, suspended, as if the universe itself were holding its breath, waiting on the consent of a single man. Isaiah glanced around, searching for anyone else who might step forward. But the sanctuary was empty, save for the burning ones and the overwhelming presence of God. I am here," he managed at first, the words thin. Then his voice steadied as courage rose from a deeper place within him. "Here am I, send me." The answer left his lips before he could weigh the cost. It did not come from calculation, but from the soul. For a long heartbeat the temple fell utterly still, no wings, no anthem, only the sound of Isaiah's heavy breathing in the holy silence. Suddenly the light around the throne intensified, as if heaven itself were answering his yes. The messenger drew near again, meeting Isaiah's eyes with a gaze that held both compassion and solemn gravity. "Listen carefully, Isaiah," he said. "The path before you will not be easy. Your words will be like hammers striking stone, and they will fall on hearts of stone. You will speak to the people, but they will stop their ears. You will prophesy, but they will refuse to believe." Isaiah's brow tightened. "Lord, how long? How long will they not listen?" The reply rolled through the temple like thunder. "Until the cities lie in ruins and without inhabitant, until houses stand deserted and fields lie desolate, until the Lord drives the people far away and the land is utterly forsaken." A chill ran through him. His hands began to tremble. He understood then that the calling laid on him was heavier and far more costly than he had ever imagined. The seraph lifted a hand toward him and spoke. "But Isaiah, even in the midst of devastation, a remnant will remain. A stump, a holy seed will survive." Isaiah drew a long breath, trying to take it all in. He felt small, powerless, and yet, at the same time, a new fire kindled in his chest, a flame no rejection, no pain, no future suffering could put out. Still on his knees, he closed his eyes for a moment to steady his spirit for what lay ahead. When he opened them, the temple seemed to have returned to ordinary stillness. No smoke, no blazing light, no seraphs in sight. But he knew nothing was ordinary now. He rose slowly and faced the altar. awe and reverence mingling in his gaze. As Isaiah stepped out of the temple, the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds as if the heavens themselves were whispering, "This is only the beginning." He took a few slow steps and looked toward the city. People moved through their routines, completely unaware of the encounter that had just unfolded behind the veil. From a distance, his friend Micah spotted him and hurried over. "Isaiah, where were you? You look different." Isaiah's eyes still glowed with emotion. He managed a small smile, drew a steadying breath, and said, "Micah, I believe God has given me a mission." Micah stared, startled. "What kind of mission?" Isaiah turned his gaze to the horizon, his expression sober. "A mission that will hurt more than I can imagine," he answered without hesitation, unaware of just how costly that calling would prove to be. Before we continue, a quick ask. If these deep Bible stories speak to you, please subscribe and leave a like. Your support genuinely helps us bring scripture-rich messages like Isaiah's to more hearts every day. Now back to the journey of the prophet who saw the future through eyes of faith. Isaiah moved slowly through the streets of Jerusalem, feeling the weight of the calling that had just been laid on him. With every step, the divine charge still rang in his mind. "Go and tell this people." But what God said next pressed heavy on his heart. "Micah," Isaiah called, as he reached a small square where men argued about politics and war. "I need to tell you something." Micah turned quickly. "Isaiah, you're not the same. Ever since that morning in the temple, your eyes have changed." "What happened?" Isaiah drew a long breath, as if pulling courage up from his depths. "God has called me," he said, and hesitated, "and he also revealed that the people will not listen." "What do you mean?" Micah asked, brow furrowing. "He said they will have ears but refuse to hear, eyes but refuse to see, their hearts will harden." Micah fell silent for a few beats, trying to take it in. "So you're telling me God is sending you to preach already knowing they won't listen?" "Exactly," Isaiah replied, sorrow in his gaze. "My mission is to proclaim the word, Micah, even if no one wants to hear." Micah raked a hand through his hair, baffled. "That makes no sense, Isaiah. Why would God do that?" Isaiah drew a long, heavy breath. "Because even in rejection there is a larger purpose. A remnant will be saved. A holy seed will remain." They walked in silence until they reached the edge of the marketplace. There, a knot of religious leaders, the same faces Isaiah had seen so many times in the temple, stood in stern conversation. Isaiah stepped forward carefully and lifted his voice. "People of Jerusalem, thus says the Lord, listen closely. Yet you will not understand. Look carefully, yet you will not perceive." A few men paused to hear, others shook their heads and smirked. "Another prophet of doom," someone muttered. "We don't need prophets, we need soldiers," another shouted. Isaiah kept his gaze steady. Determination set in his face. "Make the heart of this people hard. O Lord, dull their ears, blind their eyes, until the cities lie in ruins, the houses stand empty, and the fields are laid waste." For a breath the square went still. Then the scoffing returned in a wave, snickers, jeers, and barbed words. "Go home, Isaiah," an elderly man barked. "We're done with your threats." Micah stepped in, taking Isaiah by the arm. "Come on," he urged quietly. "They're not ready to listen." As they walked away, Isaiah stopped and looked back, a certainty rising in him that this first rejection was only the beginning of a long and painful road. That night in his small home he knelt and prayed, "Lord, how long? How long will I speak and not be heard? How long will I watch my people drift farther and farther from you?" The answer came like a deep whisper in his mind. "Until the land is laid waste, until chaos spreads through the cities, until only a charred stump remains. But from that stump, life will rise again." Isaiah opened his eyes slowly, caught between fear and hope. Within days the reports started to come. Enemy forces advancing, hunger growing, injustice spilling into the streets. What he had proclaimed began unfolding before his very eyes, yet the people remained indifferent. One morning, as Isaiah threaded his way through the market stalls, he heard a knot of women weeping. Another village was destroyed, one lamented, her voice breaking. Isaiah's hands curled into fists. "They must hear, they must understand," he muttered under his breath. From around a corner Micah appeared, worry etched on his face.
"Isaiah, are you going to keep going like this?"
Isaiah's reply came firm and unshaken. "Until my last breath." He knew the road ahead would be marked by pain, rejection, and long stretches of solitude. Yet a deeper certainty burned inside him that God's purpose was larger than anything he could grasp in that moment. And the greatest revelation of all was still to come. Jerusalem grew tenser by the day. Each morning delivered fresh bad news, battles lost, alliances collapsing, hunger creeping into nearby villages. Isaiah walked the streets, taking in the weary faces of his people. He knew his calling was to proclaim the word even if no one listened. But that knowledge did nothing to ease the weight in his chest. One overcast afternoon he was summoned to the royal palace. King Ahaz, now on the throne, looked uncertain, hesitant, gripped by fear. The threat of invasion from the kingdoms of Israel and Aram had driven him to panic. The moment Isaiah entered the throne room, he felt the strain in the air. Armed guards at attention, advisors whispering, pale faces tight with worry. "Isaiah," the king cried, desperation cracking his voice. "What does your God say about this? We're hemmed in on every side. My heart is failing me." Isaiah drew a deep breath, closed his eyes for a beat to gather strength, then stepped closer and spoke with steady authority. "Hear me, O house of David. Do not fear those two smoldering stubs of firewood, the kings of Aram and Israel." King Ahaz stared at him, eyes tight with anxiety. "How can I not be afraid? They're already at our gates." Isaiah did not waver. "The Lord himself will give you a sign, something that will show he is still in control." He paused, met the king's gaze, and said with quiet authority, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." A heavy silence fell over the room. "What?" Ahaz asked, visibly shaken. "A virgin conceiving? That's impossible." Around him, advisors traded uneasy glances and hushed objections. "This makes no sense," one whispered. "Isaiah, you speak in riddles," another snapped, irritation masking fear. Micah, who had accompanied Isaiah to the palace, edged closer and whispered, "Isaiah, are you certain you heard rightly?" Isaiah nodded, firm. "I am." While the men muttered, questioned, even scoffed, Isaiah stood motionless, his eyes fixed on a horizon none of them could see. "Emmanuel," he repeated softly, almost as a prayer, "God with us." As they left the palace, Micah walked beside Isaiah, still reeling. "A virgin? How could that happen?" Isaiah stopped, turned to his friend, and said, "I don't know, Micah. I can't explain the how, but I know this is what God revealed. And I know that one day that child will be born." "But the people," Micah pressed, "they barely believe what you already say. How could they accept something like this?" Isaiah looked up at the sky, now sealed in gray cloud. "I don't grasp every detail either, my friend," he admitted, "but I know I have to speak." In the days that followed, word of the prophecy raced through the city. Wherever Isaiah went, he heard the commentary, "A son from a virgin. Madness." Now the prophets truly lost it. Laughter trailed him in the streets, sarcasm sharpened in doorways, and the insults turned open and direct. Yet he would not take back a single word. One morning, as Isaiah made his way toward the temple, a pack of young men cut him off.
"Hey, prophet!"
One jeered, "So when's your Emmanuel showing up?" Another smirked, "We get it, you love metaphors, right?" Isaiah stopped and met their eyes calmly. "Laugh today, mock if you must, but the word of the Lord does not fail." They burst into laughter and drifted away. Back at home, Isaiah did what he had done so many nights before. He knelt and prayed. "Lord, why show me things my mind can't contain? Why command me to proclaim a sign so mysterious?" Only the night answered. Sitting there with eyes closed and a heavy heart, he was suddenly given a brief vision. A woman bathed in light, her belly swelling with life, a child resting in her arms. "Emmanuel," he breathed, tears streaming down his face. The image vanished as quickly as it came. Isaiah sat motionless, struggling for breath. "This is beyond human reasoning," he whispered, the tears still falling, knowing full well he had just seen something no logic could hold. In the weeks after the sign of Emmanuel, Isaiah's path grew even harder. Tension in Jerusalem swelled like a storm about to break. Enemies pressed at the borders, and fear gripped the city. Even so, each morning Isaiah rose with the same conviction to deliver the hope God had entrusted to him. On a bitter morning he took his place in the central square, where merchants were lifting their stall doors, and citizens traded whispers about the latest threats. He lifted his voice. "Hear me, people of Judah. Do not let fear devour you. The Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and he shall be called Emmanuel, God with us." A few stopped to listen. Many kept walking, heads shaking in disbelief. From the crowd a man mocked, "Ah, the dreaming prophet is back, with doom and impossible promises." Another, face drawn with bitterness, added, "Emmanuel? What kind of God lets suffering like this fall on us?" Isaiah pressed on, undeterred. "Even in the thick of despair there is hope. This child is the sign that God has not abandoned us. Even when heaven seems silent, even when everything around us screams defeat, God is with us." Micah, never far from his side, drew close and whispered, "Isaiah, can't you see it? The more you speak, the more hatred you stir up. They look at you with contempt." Isaiah closed his eyes for a beat. "I know, Micah, but if God has told me to speak, I will speak. Even if no one believes, His word does not return empty." That night Isaiah gathered his family at home. With his wife and children around him, he spoke, emotion thickening his voice. "My children, I know many laugh at me. They say I'm out of my mind. But hear me, I believe every word the Lord has given. One day this child, this Emmanuel, will be born, and he will change everything." His wife, quiet as ever, reached for his hand and squeezed it gently. "I believe you, my love." Isaiah smiled through brimming tears. Days later, a delegation of religious leaders came looking for Isaiah in the temple, faces set like stone, hostility just beneath the surface. "Isaiah," the eldest said flatly, "we cannot allow you to keep spreading false hope among the people." "We're suffering enough," Isaiah answered, firm and unshaken. "These words are not mine. They are from the Lord of hosts. If He has sent me to proclaim hope, then that is what I will do." The man snorted, anger flaring. "Then let your God protect you, because the people are tired of promises that never come true." When they turned and left, Isaiah remained alone in the sanctuary, eyes fixed on the altar. "Lord, I am tired," he whispered. "My heart aches, but I will not turn back." That night he dreamed a small boy ran among the olive trees, a peaceful smile on his face, a quiet that seemed to blanket everything. "Emmanuel," Isaiah breathed as he woke, tears wetting his cheeks. Even in that tender image of hope, he sensed there was something greater still veiled from his understanding. The sign of the Virgin was only the beginning, only a sign. The deeper mystery remained hidden. The days wore on, and Jerusalem stayed steeped in uncertainty. Military threats tightened like a noose, and hunger began creeping into the poorest homes. People moved through the streets with heads down and dull eyes, carrying the heavy weight of hopelessness on their backs. Isaiah, however, remained steadfast. Every morning, before the sun even thought of rising, he climbed a hill outside the city to pray. "Lord," he whispered into the dark, "we are weary. We're at the edge of collapse. We need a word, a sign, a light." And that morning, still on his knees, something extraordinary happened. His body trembled as a new vision flooded his mind. It felt as though the heavens themselves opened before him. He saw a child, not an ordinary child, but one encircled by a radiance, as if the very glory of God rested upon that small figure. Then a voice from heaven echoed with authority, "For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Isaiah's eyes flew open, his heart pounding. "A Prince of Peace," he whispered, still trying to take in what he had just seen. Without delay, he came down the hill and hurried through Jerusalem's streets. At the market gate, where a small crowd had gathered, he lifted his voice without hesitation. "Listen, people of Judah, there is hope. The Lord has revealed that a child will be born. Authority will rest on his shoulders. He will bring true justice and lasting peace. His name will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." Some stopped, curious. Others folded their arms with skepticism. A merchant barked, "Another child, Isaiah? Wasn't Emmanuel enough? Now you bring yet another prophecy?" A woman clutching her little one asked, voice unsteady, "When, Isaiah, when will this child be born? We're tired of waiting." Isaiah drew a steady breath. "I do not know when," he said, "but I know this, the Lord keeps every promise He makes." Micah, always at his side, pulled him into a corner. "Isaiah, do you realize what you're doing? Every new word you speak seems to split the people even more. Some are starting to believe, but many others are turning against you." "I know, Micah," Isaiah said, "but the message isn't mine." He clenched his fist, resolve tightening in his chest. "I cannot remain silent." That night, lying on his small bed, he could barely sleep. The words of the vision kept circling in his mind without end. "Prince of Peace, mighty God, everlasting Father." "Lord," he prayed into the darkness, "how can a simple child bear titles like these? Who will this son be? And how will we recognize him?" The days that followed only grew more difficult. Each time Isaiah stood to speak in public, the tension ratcheted higher. Some religious leaders began to whisper that he had lost his mind, that his visions were nothing but the byproduct of exhaustion and despair, rumors that spread like smoke on a dry wind. One afternoon, as Isaiah walked the temple corridors, a group of priests intercepted him. "Isaiah," the eldest said with clipped authority, "stop speaking about this child. You're confusing the people." "Confusing?" Isaiah replied, eyes steady with determination. "I'm proclaiming the truth. God is speaking. Truth?" Another priest scoffed. "What kind of God promises salvation through a child? Where is the army? Where is the strength we need?" Isaiah drew a slow breath. "Not by armies and not by human strength," he answered. "God's deliverance will come in a way you do not expect." They turned away laughing, and Isaiah stood there alone, eyes fixed on the altar, heart heavy. That night, as he prayed at home, a brief vision overtook him. Crowds from many nations, different languages, different faces, streaming toward a great light rising on the horizon. "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light," he whispered, repeating the words as they formed in his mind. The next day he returned to the central square and proclaimed, "The people who walked in darkness will see a great light, those who dwell in the shadow of death. On them the light of the Lord will rise." As before, many turned away. Some laughed. A few, angrier than the rest, hurled stones. Isaiah ducked, and Micah pulled him to safety, the two of them slipping through the narrow alleys of Jerusalem until they reached home. Once inside, Isaiah dropped to his knees. "Lord, how will this happen? When? Where? Who will this child be? How will the people believe?" Again only silence answered. Hope and confusion wrestled in his chest. He knew he stood inside a story far larger than he could grasp, but the meaning of it all was still veiled from his eyes. He did not yet understand how this would change everything. The light of hope Isaiah carried after the vision of the Prince of Peace began to dim under the weight of the new messages God laid on his heart. The words now pressing in were sharp, cutting like a double-edged sword. No more promises of quick comfort. What God required him to proclaim now was judgment. At first light, Isaiah walked to the temple entrance, face pale, eyes hollow from nights of silent weeping. "Micah," he called, his voice unsteady, "the word the Lord has given me today is too heavy." Micah's brow knit with concern. "More judgment, Isaiah?" The prophet only nodded, drew a long breath, and lifted his voice to the passers-by on the temple steps. "O house of Israel, O Judah, thus says the Lord of hosts, woe to Assyria, the rod of my anger. By it I will strike the rebellious nations. And as for you, people of Jerusalem, your arrogance will be brought low, the proud humbled, and the land laid waste." People paused. A strange hush hung in the air. Then the murmurs started. "He's finally lost his mind," an elder scoffed. "Always condemnation. Where is the God of mercy our fathers worshipped?" another mocked. Isaiah stepped down from the steps and continued through the streets, still proclaiming, "Cities will be laid waste, trees felled, vineyards ruined, the pride of Judah brought low. You trust in alliances and in your armies. Know this, the day is coming when your warriors will run without looking back." Micah walked beside him, head bowed. "Isaiah, they won't listen. They don't want to listen." "I know," the prophet answered, his voice heavy, "but I cannot be silent." That night he barely slept. Kneeling on the cold floor, he prayed through the dark. "Lord, how long? How long must I proclaim judgment and ruin? How long must I look into closed faces, deaf ears, and hardened hearts?" In answer to his prayer, another vision rose before his weary eyes. Scorched fields stretching to the horizon, homes ground to dust, children crying in the streets, mothers in mourning, priests with torn garments sitting in ashes. "This is the price of our disobedience," he whispered as tears traced down his face. The next day, at a small gathering of farmers, Isaiah tried to warn them, "Your fields will be seized, your harvests destroyed. The enemy will sweep in like a swarm of locusts. Hear the voice of the Lord while there is still time. One man shot to his feet, anger flashing. Enough, prophet. Our problems are political, not spiritual. We don't want to hear your threats. Isaiah stood his ground. You may try to silence me, but you cannot silence the voice of God. Micah seized his arm and pulled him back, afraid the crowd would stone him then and there. As they moved through the narrow alleys, Isaiah suddenly stopped, eyes fixed on something only he could see. Micah, I love them, he said, voice breaking. I love this people, but their hearts are so hard. How can I watch all of this and not be able to stop it? You've done everything you can, Micah replied, resting a hand on his shoulder. What's left now is to pray. Isaiah nodded, but the weight of his calling felt nearly unbearable. That night, in the hush of the temple, he withdrew again to kneel near the altar. Lord, my heart is broken. The words you've given me are heavy as stones. How long? How long? A strong wind pushed through the curtains, and a chill ran down his spine. God had shown him the consequences of disobedience, but the prophet sensed the coming sorrow would not fall on the people alone. He himself would face pain he could not yet imagine. He wondered if he could endure more, not knowing that the greatest pain was still ahead. Weeks passed, and Isaiah's heart stayed at war with itself. The weight of the judgment oracles still pressed on him. But in the middle of that pain, a new vision began to rise during his before-dawn prayers. It was a bitter morning. Wind knifed through Jerusalem's streets as Isaiah climbed the familiar hill where he sought answers. He knelt on the dry ground, hands lifted to the sky. Lord, how long will I see only destruction? How long will you show me only judgment? He closed his eyes, and a different scene took shape. Not war, not ruin. A man, humble in appearance, face marked by sorrow, shoulders bent as if carrying an invisible load. Isaiah squinted, trying to see more clearly. Who is this? He whispered as the image sharpened. Then a voice, soft yet unwavering, sounded in his mind. Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one in whom my soul delights. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will bring justice to the nations. Isaiah opened his eyes, breath coming fast, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning cold. A servant, he murmured, pushing himself to his feet. Who is this man? That day, weaving through Jerusalem's narrow streets, he passed familiar faces. Some turned away in disdain, others glanced with quiet pity. His reputation among the people was fraying, but none of it mattered now. His mind was seized by the image of the servant. When he met Micah again, Isaiah spoke at once. Micah, I had another vision. Another? His friend asked, worry in his eyes. Yes, but this time it was different. Not war, not judgment. A man, a servant. Micah frowned. A servant who? I don't know, Isaiah admitted, shaking his head, baffled. He was different. There was something of God about him, and at the same time a depth of humility I can't describe. What was he doing? Micah pressed. Isaiah drew a steady breath. He brought justice, but without shouting, without raising his voice in the streets. He wouldn't break a bruised reed or snuff out a smoldering wick. He carried suffering as though it were his own. Micah fell silent for a moment, weighing every word. Isaiah, do you think this man is already among us? I don't know, the prophet answered, eyes searching the horizon. But I sense his mission will be greater than anything I've ever declared. In the days that followed, Isaiah began to write as if to relieve the pressure inside him. Listen to me, you coastlands. Hear this, you distant nations. The Lord called me from the womb. From my mother's body he named me. He paused, drawing a deep breath, feeling the weight in each stroke of the pen. From the womb, he whispered, chosen before birth. One afternoon in the marketplace, a young man stepped into his path with a mocking grin. Hey, prophet, now it's a mysterious servant, huh? Who's next, an invisible king? An army of angels? Laughter flared around them. Isaiah said nothing, but inside him the conflict tightened like a knot. That night, Isaiah lay awake, sleep refusing to come. The vision kept replaying, the servant's face, the compassion in his eyes, the strange union of suffering and unbreakable resolve. Finally he rose, crossed to the small table where his scrolls lay, and began to write again. I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring my salvation to the ends of the earth. He stopped and stared at the words, a light for the Gentiles. The thought felt unimaginable. Salvation not only for Israel, but for the nations. He ran his hands over his face, trying to steady the rush of questions. "What does this mean? Lord? Who is this servant? Why does he carry so much sorrow?" A chill traced his spine. For the first time, Isaiah sensed that the story unfolding before him stretched far beyond his understanding, across borders, across centuries. He was standing at the edge of a revelation that would change everything he thought he knew. Little by little, Isaiah's words about the servant began to ripple louder through Jerusalem's streets, not with comfort, but with confusion, irritation, and most of all, rejection. On a gray morning, he took his stand at one of the city's busiest corners, his voice steady but weighted with sorrow. "Listen, O house of Israel. The Lord has revealed his servant, a man of sorrows, acquainted with suffering, despised and rejected by men." "What's passers-by slowed. Some looked on with disdain, others with indifference. "There he goes again," a merchant muttered. "Always talking about suffering. Who wants to hear that? Give us victory, salvation, not pain." Isaiah went on, unflinching. "Beneath the hard stares, this servant will offer his back to those who strike him and his cheeks, to those who pull out his beard. He will not hide his face from insult or spittle. He will be humiliated, yet he will not open his mouth to defend himself." A stone suddenly skittered across the dust and thudded at Isaiah's feet. "Enough!" a man barked, hatred blazing in his eyes. "I'm done with your words of doom." Voices rose around him. "Shut up, prophet of sorrow. Why would God choose a weak man to be his servant? We want a liberator, a warrior." Isaiah's chest tightened. Even in the crush of the crowd, the weight of solitude pressed heavier than ever. Later that afternoon, as he returned home, a deeper wound waited at his door. His cousin Eliab, the one he'd grown up with, stood there glancing up and down the street. "Isaiah," Eliab began in a low voice, "please, stop this. Just stop." Isaiah's reply came rough with hurt. "People say you've gone mad." Eliab pushed on. "No one wants to trade with our family anymore. My daughters are being avoided. Our relatives are ashamed to carry your name." Isaiah lowered his head. The blow landed deep. "Eliab, I didn't choose this," he said softly. "God chose me. I can't be silent." Eliab's fists clenched in frustration. "Then bear the consequences alone. Don't count on me." Without waiting for a reply, he turned and walked away. Micah, who had watched from a distance, came near. "Isaiah, even your own family now? Even them?" Isaiah could only nod, eyes filling with tears. That night he withdrew to the temple, fell to his knees before the altar, and cried out, "Lord, how long? How long will I be mocked? How long will I be rejected by those I love?" As he wept, a new vision took shape, clearer than before. He saw the servant again, a gentle-eyed man shoved and beaten, spat upon, absorbing every blow without retaliation, silent under hatred. "Why?" Isaiah cried. "Why so much suffering? Who is this man, Lord?" The scene tightened and drew, his gaze to a detail he had missed. Blood, at first on the face, then streaming from open wounds across the back as though scourged, punished, publicly humiliated. Isaiah covered his face in despair. "My God, what is this? Who would do such cruelty to the innocent?" His heart pounded. Tears would not stop. There on the temple floor, alone, rejected, undone, he understood that the ache he carried was only a faint shadow of the pain this servant would endure. Sleep would not come. The last vision hunted Isaiah through the night. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw the servant's face again. The look carried both a depth of pain and rejection, and, at the very same time, a strange, unexplainable compassion. Before dawn, on a cold morning, Isaiah climbed the same hill where he had prayed so many times before. He dropped to his knees, pressed his face to the ground, and cried out in agony, "Lord, please, I can't carry this any longer. Why do you make me see it?" And once more, as so often before, it felt as if the heavens tore open above him. The vision came hard and relentless. The servant appeared in greater detail than ever. a man moving slowly down a narrow street, hemmed in by onlookers whose eyes were hard with disdain. Some spat on the ground as he passed, others shook their heads in scorn. An inner voice began to speak in Isaiah's mind, as if God himself were dictating the lines. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with suffering. Isaiah gasped for breath. He saw the servant shoved and dragged, beaten. Without mercy, the face was swollen, mottled with bruises, the eyes barely open from so many blows, yet somehow still carrying love. How? How can he look like that? Isaiah murmured, tears spilling unchecked. And the voice went on. Like one from whom men hide their faces. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Isaiah collapsed to his knees, his whole body trembling. The pain felt so real, so intense, it seemed to cut into his own flesh. The scene shifted. Now the servant was being scourged, his back torn and opened, blood welling with every lash. "No," the prophet cried, "this is too much. I can't bear it." But the vision did not stop. The cords fell again and again, skin split, blood mingled with the dust of the road. And still the servant did not protest. He did not fight. He did not resist. Why does he accept this? Isaiah murmured through sobs. And then, as if God himself answered, the holy voice continued, "Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. Yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him, and afflicted." Overwhelmed, Isaiah shook his head as if to fling the image away. But it held, unyielding, brutal, real, and the vision pressed on. The servant was being led somewhere. Isaiah could not see the place, but he could hear it, the shouting, the mockery, the distant weeping of women. The voice went on, "He was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities." Isaiah felt his strength drain. His knees buckled and he collapsed to the ground. "Crushed," he whispered, "because of our guilt, our sins." The weight of the revelation settled on him like a vice, tightening until he could scarcely draw breath. The final scene hit him like a blow to the chest, the servant lying still, body torn with wounds, eyes closed, lifeless. Isaiah covered his face with both hands and cried out, "Lord, I can't take this anymore. Don't show me anymore, please. It's too much." A hard wind swept the hill. Dry leaves spiraled around the prophet as he lay prostrate, shaking with sobs. He stayed there motionless, weeping, until Micah, who had been searching for him since morning, finally found him. "Isaiah, what happened? Are you all right?" Isaiah lifted his face, eyes raw and broken, voice thin with desperation. "No, Micah, I'm not. What I saw, what God showed me," he struggled for breath. "I don't know if I can bear it." Micah helped him to his feet, steadying his arm. But Isaiah knew, deep down, that what he had witnessed was only the beginning of a far greater suffering. He felt at the very edge of endurance, never imagining that this was only the start. Isaiah could barely lift himself from the ground after the vision of the wounded, humiliated servant. The images were etched into his mind with terrifying clarity, and the words he'd heard rolled through his chest like silent thunder. Even on the walk home, his legs felt like lead. Every step dragged forward as if the whole weight of what he had witnessed had settled on his shoulders. Micah followed close behind, worry etched on his face. "Isaiah," he said gently, laying a hand on his shoulder, "since that vision you barely speak, barely sleep, what did you see?" Isaiah stopped, drew a long, unsteady breath, and answered in a low voice, "Something I can't even explain." Micah, like heaven itself, was weeping, as if the judgment I've proclaimed for years wasn't falling on the guilty, but on someone innocent. That night Isaiah shut himself in his writing room. He took up his scroll and inkwell, and with hands that would not stop trembling he began to write, pouring onto the page what his soul could no longer hold. The words poured out like a river, painful, unstoppable. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Isaiah paused. Tears slipped unnoticed. The inkwell tipped from his fingers and bled across the parchment. He drew a long breath, fighting to steady himself. "Pierced," he whispered. "But how?" His hand pressed against his tightening chest as the images surged back with force. The servant was bound, fixed to something. Isaiah looked closer. Wood. Arms outstretched. hands and feet pierced by instruments he did not recognize. What is this?" he breathed, struggling to comprehend. It was a kind of execution unknown to him, cruel, deliberate, drawn out. The vision pressed on, the servant hanging limp, body soaked in blood, while people circled below, laughing, jeering, pointing as if the shame were part of the sentence. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, and like a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. The words arrived as if God himself were whispering them into Isaiah's chest. He let the quill fall and covered his face with both hands. "Why, Lord, why does this man endure all of it without a word? Why doesn't he defend himself?" he cried in anguish. He remembered the trials he'd witnessed in Jerusalem, men pleading, shouting, clawing for their lives before the judges. "But the servant," he breathed, "he remains silent. How can someone be condemned unjustly and still accept it?" The questions pounded through his mind. Then another flash of sight. The servant's body lowered from the wood. A man stepping forward with reverent care, wrapping him in linen, carrying him to a new tomb hewn from the rock. "He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death," Isaiah murmured, shaken by the precision of what he saw. The tears came heavier now. "It makes no sense!" he cried, lurching to his feet and sending scrolls and inkwells clattering. "Why, an innocent man? Why must someone so pure suffer like this?" Micah, hearing the commotion, rushed into the room. "Isaiah, what's happening?" Isaiah turned, eyes bloodshot, cheeks smeared with ink and choked out between sobs. "I saw it. I saw every detail. The suffering, the beatings, the nails, the humiliation, the death." Micah stood stunned, silent for a long moment. "But why?" he finally managed. Isaiah met his friend's gaze, pain and awe mingling in his eyes. "Micah," he said, voice low but steady, "it wasn't for his sins. It was for ours. All the guilt, all the pain that belonged to us was laid on him." Micah stepped back as if the words themselves had weight. "But Isaiah," he stammered, "that's too cruel. No one would do that for a people who rejected him." Isaiah nodded slowly. "No one, except someone sent directly by God. Someone carrying a purpose far beyond our understanding." Silence settled over the room. The two of them stood motionless, weighed down by the revelation. Isaiah reached for the scroll again and kept writing, though his hand trembled, though he had done no violence and no deceit was found in his mouth. He knew that however much pain these lines carried, they had to be set down, words meant to outlast generations. Yet as he waded deeper into the images of suffering, something new began to form at the far edge of the vision, something he could not yet grasp, and it unsettled him even more. He saw a light, something on the far side of death, a detail that should not exist, that defied every law of what he had just witnessed. Isaiah stopped, drew a long breath, and whispered to himself, dazed, "This is impossible." Only then did he realize he was not merely describing agony and loss, but something unimaginable breaking in beyond the grave. Isaiah stayed frozen, eyes locked on the scroll, hand trembling over the wooden table. The images of the servant's suffering, humiliation, death were seared into his mind, as if he had stood there for every blow, every tear, every stifled groan. And yet now something new, something that defied all human logic, began to take shape. As he tried to finish the final lines about the servant's death, a sudden light flooded his vision. Not ordinary light, an intensity that was almost blinding. Instinctively he squeezed his eyes shut, but the scene remained crystal clear. The same servant alive. "No, this can't be," he whispered, voice catching. He forced his eyes open as if to shake the sight away, then closed them again, and the image held. The one he had just seen beaten, pierced, dead, was now standing. His face was calm, his eyes alive with purpose. The scars were still there, undeniable, yet something had overtaken them. Something Isaiah could not name, and it made him tremble. A soft voice, like a divine whisper, rose within him. "After the anguish of his soul, he will see the light and be satisfied." Isaiah felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Light satisfied after such suffering, he murmured, covering his face with his hands as he tried to steady the storm inside him. He pushed back from the table and began to pace. "And this is impossible," he said aloud. "No one returns from death. No one." The creak of the door cut through his thoughts. Micah stumbled in out of breath. "Isaiah, rumors are spreading. People are gathering, demanding you stop." They say your words are unsettling everyone." Isaiah kept his eyes on the floor, voice low. "Micah, what I've just seen, even I can barely believe it." "What did you see?" Micah pressed, stepping closer. Isaiah drew a deep breath as if trying to order his thoughts. "I saw life after death. I saw the servant, the one who was crushed, pierced, standing alive as if death itself had been overthrown." Micah stepped back, startled. "Isaiah, that's impossible." "I know," the prophet replied, tears slipping slowly. "But I saw it with these eyes." Isaiah moved to the table, lifted the scroll, and, hands still trembling, began to write again. "It pleased the Lord to crush him and let him suffer. When his life is made an offering for sin, he will see his offspring. He will prolong his days, and the purpose of the Lord will prosper in his hand." He paused, weighing every line. "He will prolong his days," he repeated, trying to grasp it. "Does that mean he will live, even after being crushed?" Micah, still in shock, sank beside him. "Isaiah, do you realize what you're saying? You're writing that a real man will die, and then live again." Isaiah nodded slowly. "That's exactly it, and more." Awe filled his eyes. "He won't merely live again, he will see the reward of his suffering. He will witness the fruit of his sacrifice, as if death itself does not have the final word over him." Silence settled over the room. Isaiah knew that to speak this aloud would invite more mockery, more rejection, more pain. Who would believe in a resurrection? Who would accept a prophecy so outrageous? He closed his eyes, drew a long breath, and, still on his knees, whispered, "Lord, I'm standing at the edge of something my mind cannot grasp. I need understanding. I need your strength." A breeze slipped through the half-open window, and in that moment a new conviction began to grow in his heart. Something immense, too revolutionary to comprehend alone, was being written through his hands. He could feel it taking shape even as he trembled at the cost. Jerusalem's days stayed heavy, as if the very air carried the weight of Isaiah's words. With each message he delivered, war, famine, judgment, suffering, it felt like another piece of the people's hope was torn away, and events unfolded exactly as he had warned. Yet one morning, as he woke, something different stirred in his spirit. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he closed his eyes and prayed in silence, "Lord, after all I've seen, after all I've heard, is there any hope?" In that moment a new vision took shape. Fields blooming where there had been only dry ground. Children playing in the streets without fear. Men and women joyfully rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem while laughter and songs rolled through the city. Then a gentle voice, almost a whisper, filled the room. "The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor and the broken-hearted. He has sent me to bind up the crushed in spirit, to proclaim liberty for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to announce the year of the Lord's favor and the day of our God's justice, to comfort all who mourn." Isaiah's eyes flew open, heart pounding. "Hope," he breathed, and without delay he rushed into the streets, crossing the squares until he reached the temple. There, with a voice both steady and full of feeling, he proclaimed, "O Jerusalem, people of Judah, listen, a time of restoration is coming. It will not always be ashes and mourning. There will be comfort for those who weep. There will be freedom for the oppressed." The people, accustomed to his hard messages, stared in surprise. Some pressed closer, curious. An elderly woman called out, "Are you saying that after all this there is still hope?" Isaiah's eyes shone with tears. "Yes," he answered with conviction. "After the darkest night the sun rises again. God has not forgotten us." Micah, at his side as always, set a hand on his shoulder. "This is the word you've been waiting to speak, isn't it?" Isaiah nodded. "God showed me judgment and suffering, but now He shows me redemption, a new beginning, a new chance for all of us." The days that followed felt different. Some still rejected Isaiah, but for the first time he met steady eyes and open hearts. People willing to hear about a better future. He began to record the new vision with special care, to grant those who mourn in Zion a crown instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, a garment of praise in place of a spirit of despair. They would be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of His splendor. As he wrote, tears traced his cheeks, not from pain this time, but from hope. Micah watched from a distance and whispered to a friend, "I've never seen Isaiah so resolute, so alive." Yet even with this renewed strength, something unsettled the prophet's heart. A detail felt missing, a final piece still hidden. For all the talk of restoration and hope, Isaiah sensed that the deepest purpose behind his visions had not yet been fully revealed. That night, as the cold wind tugged at the curtains, Isaiah knelt alone once more. Lord, you've shown me the pain, the judgment, the redemption, but I sense there is more, much more, something that ties it all together, something that gives meaning to every word I've written. He waited for hours in silence. At last, fatigue overtook him, and he fell asleep right there on the floor. In his dreams, a new light began to rise on the horizon of his mind. Something immense, terrifying, and glorious all at once. The final revelation, the true answer to why the book of Isaiah is the most astonishing in the Bible, was still to come. Isaiah woke still on his knees, his face against the stone floor. Dawn crept into the small house, sending thin gold bands of light through the cracks of the window. His body ached, his knees were bruised, yet a different kind of peace, and at the same time a taut, unfamiliar tension hung in the air. He rose slowly, washed his face, drew a long breath, and with trembling hands lifted a fresh scroll. Something in his spirit compelled him forward, and the words pressed on him with overwhelming urgency. He closed his eyes. The visions returned, only now they seemed to lock into place. He saw the servant. He saw the improbable birth from a virgin. He saw the child grow in wisdom, bringing comfort to the afflicted, healing to the sick, freedom to the oppressed. He also saw the scorn, the betrayal, the suffering, the death, and then life breaking forth where there had only been death. Isaiah opened his eyes with tears streaming down his face. "My God," he whispered, voice breaking, "everything points to him. Everything I've seen, every word I've spoken, it's all about one man, one Savior." Micah rushed into the room and called out, "Isaiah, are you all right? You look pale." Isaiah looked up, eyes shining as if he could see beyond what human sight allows. "Micah, I understand now. I finally understand." "Understand what?" Micah asked. Isaiah drew a deep breath. Awe and emotion braided in his voice. "All the visions, every word of judgment, every promise of redemption, every image of suffering and of glory, they all point to the Messiah, the servant, Emmanuel, the Prince of Peace. They're all him. One man, one plan, one Savior." Micah stood in stunned silence. "But Isaiah, how can that be? You're speaking of things that won't happen for centuries. How can you be so certain?" Isaiah lifted the scroll and with a steady voice recited, "He will see the fruit of the anguish of his soul, and be satisfied. By his knowledge my righteous servant will justify many, for he will bear their iniquities." He set the pen down, eyes brimming, and looked at his friend. "I am writing the gospel itself before it happens." Micah dropped into a seat, speechless. "This is unbelievable," he murmured. Isaiah went on, "The nations will see him. Kings will shut their mouths because of him. He will be exalted, lifted up, and greatly glorified. But before that, he will be rejected, pierced, crushed for us." He rose, moved to the window, and stared toward the horizon. "I don't grasp every detail, Micah, but I know this: when this servant comes, he will fulfill everything God has shown me. Every word, every tear, every promise." Still stunned, Micah asked quietly, "And the people, Isaiah, will they believe?" Isaiah's smile held both ache and hope. "Some will, others won't. But when it all comes to pass, when every prophecy is fulfilled, the whole world will know." He closed his eyes, drew a deep breath, and fixing his gaze on the heavens, declared, "For the Lord of hosts has spoken, and his word never fails." In that moment, a deep certainty settled in Isaiah's heart. He had been chosen to record the greatest plan in human history, a plan that would only be fully understood centuries later, yet was already taking shape line by line in the prophecies pouring from his lips. As he finished, he set the pen down, drew a long breath, and smiled through tears. And now, do you see why the book of Isaiah stands as the most astonishing in all of Scripture? The revelation might just shock you. When Isaiah completed his prophecies, he likely didn't grasp the full weight of what he was handing to the world. He was a man with doubts and fears and many tears, yet with a rare courage. A man who chose obedience when those around him rejected him, who kept writing, kept speaking, kept prophesying, even when he did not yet understand it all. Today, when we turn the pages of Isaiah, we're not just reading ancient poetry. We're tracing a prophetic map, a timeline stretched across centuries that points directly to the coming of the Messiah. Jesus Christ. From the virgin birth to the brutal suffering, from rejection to resurrection, the details unfold with a precision that seems to defy human explanation. And what about what still lies ahead? Isaiah also speaks of the second coming, the glorious return, and a kingdom of unending peace where there is no more death, no sorrow, no crying, and no pain. Isaiah 25:8. His words are an invitation. Choose to trust as he did even when you're rejected. Speak hope in the middle of crisis, and hold to God's promises when everything around you shouts the opposite. If Isaiah, centuries before Christ, could see so clearly what the world would only understand later, imagine what God may be ready to reveal to you today. And so the question that reaches into our own moment is simple yet powerful. What about you? Are you ready to live with the same faith and courage as Isaiah? Are you ready to believe that just as every word spoken then was fulfilled, God's promises for your life will also come to pass? The book of Isaiah is not just history, it is living testimony that God still speaks, and when He speaks, nothing can keep His word from being fulfilled. Rise, believe, proclaim, because the same God who called Isaiah is calling you today. If this story stirred your heart, 2 more videos featuring equally inspiring people of the Bible should be on your screen. Tap to keep watching, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like so we can share messages like this with more people. May God speak to you just as He spoke to Isaiah in the most unexpected moments.